Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm Henrey Lee Dogman, filling in for Bigfoot, who has been extremely ill for a while and in a lot of pain. I don't know the details, so don't ask me. Maybe Debbie American might know. What I do know is that we've got a few all-new Dogman stories for you today, and I will be your host. But first, we can't do any of this without announcing today's executive producer. And today's executive producer is Jonathan Cruz. Listen, my friend, and I'll give you the news about a dude named Jonathan Cruz. Jonathan Cruz never has the blues, 'cause you can't snooze on Jonathan Cruz. Thanks, Jonathan. We couldn't do this channel without cool dudes like you. If you want to become a Scary Stories executive producer, just join our channel memberships by clicking the join link under our videos, or else by becoming a paid subscriber at peterbernard.com, which we'll explain at the end of the show. We got a phone call from one of you guys coming up later in the program. We don't mention this enough, but you can send us your scary stories either via email to scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by calling our Scary Stories hotline number 1-804-LA-SCARY, which is also 804-537-2279. In fact, this week's secret uncensored story for our channel members and paid subscribers is a phone call from one of you guys that tells of a very terrifying Dogman encounter. I'm going to play you a clip from the story right here to give you a taste.
Then he burst his way forth through the hedges again. And it reminded me of my grandmother's dog, which was a collie, that ran at me, you know, wanting to lick and play with me, but I knew this one didn't want to do that. But it reminded me of that just in my brain as he charged through the bushes at me.
We can't play that entire story on this show because it involves subject matter that YouTube considers bad for advertisers, at least on small channels like ours. But I will play a couple more clips from that long story throughout the rest of this episode to give you an idea what the paid subscribers are getting to hear. But now, let's jump into our first tale. It's a doozy sent in via email from one of you and adapted into the story that we call I Saw Dogman Climb into a Hole That Wasn't There. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I saw a dogman, and I did what I always wanted to do. I followed him. Yes, I know that Dogman is alleged to be a vicious, man-eating beast, but I don't know that for a fact. Plus, I'm kind of impulsive, so I did what I did. Every time in my entire life that I would read or hear a Dogman story, or Bigfoot too for that matter, I would always wonder why the person it happened to didn't follow the beast to see where it went to. So that's what I did. I broke away from my friends, and I chased the thing. The four of us were parked alongside Pittsburgh Road, a little bit south of Waltersburg in Pennsylvania, eating our burgers that we had bought a while back. We were planning on bringing them home, but we got too hungry smelling them in the car, so we pulled off to enjoy our meal and have a conversation. It was the evening, but it had become dark like the night already. This was back a couple of months ago when the weather was still cooler and the sun set a little earlier than it's doing right now. Because we were in a good mood and joking around, though, it still felt like daytime to me. I wasn't spooked out by the darkness or the crickets or our closeness to the forest or anything like that. But then, that thing just showed up. It made a gruff, breathing sound, sort of like a grunt or a huff or a snort. It walked out of the tree line, saw us, and made that noise, I guess, in surprise. We all saw it at once, and although it was dark, we had the car doors open, and the creature was lit well enough to see pretty clearly by the ambient light coming from inside. It probably wasn't enough light to get a good photo, but we could clearly make out the form that we were looking at. I thought it was a man wearing a furry suit, but if it were, then he must have had the thinnest legs in human history, and they must have been bent in really odd ways, too. It was tall as a man, though, and it stood very much like a man. That didn't make it a man, obviously. There are other creatures that stand on their hind legs. Take ostriches, for example. This was not an ostrich, though. This creature looked like some kind of a pointy-eared, long-snouted wolf man, really. Or a dog man, call it what you like. It had tall, pointed ears on top, and a wolf-like snout, and it was covered in shaggy fur all over. I never saw anything like it before, so I at first didn't know what to make of what was happening. But then, my buddy Raj whispered, "That's a dog man," or something to that effect, and I realized that he might be right. This might be something like a werewolf or monster, something so rare that it isn't even supposed to exist. And it just randomly walked out of the woods and discovered us by accident. I tell you, my brain was filled with a sense of wonder, but my body was frozen solid in utter terror. I never felt so scared in my entire life. Then, after getting a look at us and making his little grunting noise, that dog man just turned to his left and started walking on back into those woods where he came from. Something about the way he didn't challenge us, but just took a different path to avoid us, made my fear drop off of me, and on a crazy impulse I said, "I want to see where he goes back to," and I ran after him. I expected at the time that at least one of my friends would run in with me, but I did not hear any of them reacting at all. They didn't sound like they were following me, and I didn't hear them asking me to come back either. I guess my decision to run after the monster took them by surprise, so they just froze there in silence. Probably for the best, though. I mean, what I did was stupid. I wondered for years why nobody ever chased man-sized cryptids, and now I know why. Because nobody ever should do something like what I did, okay? It was just an impulse, because I didn't expect I would ever get a second chance to see an actual dog man. So I ran into the woods, and I could hear him running off in front of me, so I ran in that same direction as fast as I could. I mean, I was jumping over and sliding under, things like my life depended on it. I didn't stop to listen to see if I was going in the correct direction. I was running purely on adrenaline and instinct. I ran on faith alone until I entered a clearing, and I saw it on the other side, about to re-emerge into the forest. "Stop!" I cried out, gasping for air. I wanted to say more than that, but was completely out of breath, panting desperately. I remember having my hands on my knees, trying to force myself to remain standing and conscious. And I saw that dog man stop and turn to look toward me. The face on the thing now looked angry. It was more teeth than anything else. It was like the flesh melted away from the mouth of a prehistoric skeleton, which displayed 2 rows of large murder weapons that made me wish I were still back with my buddies. The creature kind of barked at me, then turned and dove into a bush, disappearing instantly. There had to be a cave entrance or an old well or something there for the creature to have just dived in and disappeared like that. My first instinct was to turn and run now that I was safe, but the voice in my head kept telling me this was my only chance to look at what the dogman had jumped into. I thought maybe I could bring a camera crew back later or the TV news or something, but I had to see what it was first in order to lead them back to it later. Gathering up all my courage, I started walking over, and with some pain, I realized that my walk had become a limp. I was hurting for something I had done in my haste, and I didn't even know when I had injured myself. If that dogman stuck his head up out of that hole, I was not going to be able to get away very quickly. It was a really dumb thing I was doing, and I knew it at the time, but I also knew I would never again have this chance presented to me. So I grabbed that bush with my right hand, and I pushed it back to see the hole. Except there was no hole. A little more confident now, I pushed the bush back even further. There was no hole, there was no cave opening, there was nothing but dirt and a bush. And a confused guy holding the bush, that would be me. I took a few steps past that bush and looked around, but if the creature had run through that overgrown area, I would have heard its progress. It would have left some sign. No, that creature was just gone. It had dived into the bush, and then it was no longer in our reality. I went back to the guys who basically ordered me into the car and immediately drove off. They were so freaked out that they didn't even want to know what had happened to me. They told me that if I ever did that again, they would just drive off and leave me there, and they were really angry about it. I guess it was kind of selfish of me to leave them there worrying about me, but I did invite them to come with. Anyway, that's the true story of the time earlier this year that I saw a dogman climb into a hole that wasn't there.
And I had enough presence of mind to look through the hedges and watch it swim across the small stream and get up on the other side and continue to run on hind legs for about 20 yards or 10 yards, and ended up dropping back down on all fours and running on off.
That's another clip from today's secret uncensored story that only our paid subscribers and channel members get to hear. You want to hear the entire story, which gets quite violent, quite sad, and quite tragic, then just join our paid subscribers club. In the meantime, here's another all-new Dogman story. Dogman trashed my bicycle. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I got chased home at night on my bike by the Dogman. This is a story that happened to me back about 10 years ago when I still lived with my parents in Pennsylvania. They both still live in that same house, so I don't want to get too specific about the area. I used to take my bike to school and back home. One night, I was hanging out with a girl that later became my first serious girlfriend. We both lost track of time, and I didn't get started home until it was already dark out. There was a shortcut I would take home when I was in a rush. The shortcut involved going through a path in a patch of woods for about a 3-minute stretch if I was going at full speed. That's what I was doing that night, going full speed. I hadn't told my mother that I would be home late, but if I got home in the next 10 minutes, I wouldn't really technically be late. Tardy, maybe. I would get questioned, certainly, but it wouldn't be the end of the world, because I would still have made it in time for dinner. Whether the rest of my night would involve drama or be peaceful depended, in my mind, on me making these turns economically and getting home as quickly and efficiently as I could manage. And that's the way it was playing out for most of the ride, until I was in those dark woods and something big darted out in front of my bike, way too close to my front wheel. I turned and avoided hitting it, but skidded off the road onto the grass and fell off the bike as gracefully as I could manage. Getting up quickly, I turned to see what I had missed hitting, and I saw it. There, in the center of the road, looking right back at me. It was the biggest man I had ever seen. Except he had a dog head, or a dog head mask on. It looked like he was covered in brown and green moss, just hanging all over him. Then I started thinking, maybe that's his fur. His fur seemed dark brown and long, but it was covered in places by what looked like green moss. He was making a crying sound like a dog that's really worried, and I asked if he was okay. That's when he growled and snapped at me, dropping to all fours with his fur standing up on end. I didn't try to talk to him anymore. I just got on my bike and pedaled away. That dog thing ran after me, barking and growling and snarling and yapping. I made a turn off of the wooded path onto a regular block lined with houses, and I thought I was home free. I didn't think he would follow me there. I could still hear the thing behind me, though, so I kept pedaling as fast as I could manage. Looking around, I didn't see anyone out, so I started to get kind of frantic. As I turned onto the block before my home block, I nearly ran straight into a car making the opposite turn that I was making, but I narrowly avoided him. I knew that the car would be blocking the dogman, though, and I made the final dash home even more crazily than I had driven my bike up to then. Making it to my house, I jumped off the bike, leaving it on the front lawn somewhere, and racing inside. My mother greeted me with the expected grilling, but I was at least as concerned with looking out the front window to make sure that Dogman hadn't followed me home. I wasn't in any major trouble with my mom, and I seemed to have avoided the monster trying to catch and eat me. I almost told the story to my mother, but decided against it. I ended up only telling one of my classmates, but he told everyone else, and I had to deny the story in the end, saying that friend had made it up. Ha! Some friend. Anyway, this is the first time I'm admitting that it's actually all true. The next morning after this happened, I was leaving for school and I didn't see my bike anywhere. I looked in the front and the back and it was nowhere around. I remembered back to the night before and wondered if the dogman could have stolen it. That didn't make much sense, though. Even if the thing could walk on its hind legs, I couldn't imagine a dogman riding a bicycle. Maybe he just carried it off with him into the woods to be a jerk, I don't know. I had to start walking to school, though, otherwise I was going to be late. As I started down the road, I saw my neighbor walking toward me with an angry look on his face. I wondered what that was all about, but I didn't have to wonder long. He got right in my face, asking me why I threw my bike onto his roof. Why I threw my bike onto his roof? I asked him to show me where my bike was if he really knew, and he led me over to his house, pointing up at the roof. Sure enough, all the way up on the pinnacle of it, next to the chimney, my bicycle was parked. He could see by my amazed expression that I was as surprised by this as he was, and he apologized for getting all hot and heavy with me. He told me he'd get a ladder and get it down by the afternoon, and offered to drive me to school that morning. I told him I could walk it, but I would owe him a favor if he could get the thing down for me. I told him that if anything was broken, I wouldn't blame him, I would blame the idiot who threw it up there. Who, of course, had to be the Dogman. Here's another clip from today's secret uncensored story that only the paid subscribers and channel members get to hear the full uncensored version of.
I was trying to find my niece, and I had walked through the maze. I knew that she was headed to the maze because she didn't think anybody would want to go there. The sun was coming down. I'm in the maze. They have a hedge maze, you know, that's about 5.5 feet tall that you make your way through and sit and have picnics at the ends of the graveyard, which is, I knew my niece went there to hide. Well, I had a sense that something was watching me. I'd had a little dog that went with me part way that lost heart and turned away and went away. And I knew I had been out too long. Well, when I went past these certain bushes, I got grabbed. And it wasn't by teeth. It was by hand.
Hey, here's a nice phone call we got from the West Coast near San Francisco. I didn't know we had Dogman fans out there. Let's give the call a listen.
Hi, this is Peter Bernard. I like this area. My name is Ronald Albert Aisley, and I just wanted to tell you I love your scary stories. I love those creepy Dogman stories and any other creepy stories you're telling. But one thing is, I know Dogman is real, but who want to go in the woods anymore? I don't know what the Dogman would do when all of us people are staying home by the coronavirus. I imagine the Dogman is kind of restless and upset and thinking, "Where's the people? He can't scare us. We're at home." I just want to say I love your scary stories, and I wish you guys keep on making more. And that's all. Keep up the good work. Bye.
If you want to leave us a nice message like that, or maybe a scary story that happened to you personally, just call our Scary Stories hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. And now, on to our next Scary Dogman story. Dogman, talk to me through my television set. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I was thinking about something that happened to me when I was a teenager. I got in a lot of trouble for it too, but it was all because of the Dogman. My parents had gone out that night to dinner or a show or something, and they left me at home to mind the house and farm with my two younger brothers. Well, after I got the kids to go to sleep, I put on a TV show that turned out to be far more interesting than I ever would have expected. I can't tell you why I found it so interesting because I don't remember a single thing about it, except that I couldn't look away. I remember noticing that the image on screen wasn't really moving. It was just that the little dots were changing colors. I remember thinking I was seeing images in between the main images. Then I felt as though I could hear the static and hum underneath the audio that I had not noticed earlier. Soon, it felt as though someone were talking to me through the static, showing me images between the images. It was almost a form of language, but not exactly. It communicated like language. Each time I felt I had translated a concept, I enjoyed a pleasant sensation from my head to my toes, like I was being rewarded. I tried harder and harder to hear what was not there and to see what was invisible normally. It took some time, but I understood that the voice wanted me to go outside and unlock the chicken coop. This realization brought on an ecstatic sensation enveloping me. No, it was more than a sensation. It was being welcomed to heaven. I never felt anything like that before. I went outside, a giant happy grin on my face so wide that it was making my cheeks hurt. I unlocked the chicken coop and giggling, I walked back inside the house. I went over to the window that looked out on the coop to see what would happen next. Giant grin, still on my face. Out of the patch of woods past the chickens walked some kind of god form from ancient prehistory. I almost applauded at his elegant entrance. This dog-headed yet divine form may have been Anubis, but his coloring was not as dark as he is depicted in the Egyptian paintings and statues. I would guess that he was someone or something like Anubis, though. This is all how I saw it, in my ecstatic state. I watched as this divine and perfect, dog-headed yet bipedal individual opened the coop door, grabbed 3 chickens, then walked back into the woods with his birds under his arms. A number of the other chickens wandered out of the coop and started going all over the place. When the headlights from my parents coming home broke me from my haze, I saw my own reflection in the window, grinning idiotically at the escaping birds. I ran outside to start picking them up, while also desperately attempting to think of an excuse for all this to tell my parents. They were over too, catching the birds better than I was, and scolding me at the same time. Once we got all the chickens back, but 3 were still missing, my father told me I was going to join him in the forest looking for them. That was all I could take. I had a complete breakdown. Crying, no, weeping. I told my father about the Dogman. I told him that he made me unlock the coop. I told him it was some kind of magical man with a dog head. And I begged my father, please not to go into those woods after it. Well, that got me over a year seeing a shrink, plus drug education and treatment for addictions I didn't have or even understand the names of. My parents spent a ton of money and put me through about 14 months of torment to try to find out why I insisted I had seen a dog-headed man. Then, one day, for no reason that they would admit to, they stopped making me see the shrink. To this day, they've never explained why. I know what my theory is. I think they saw it. They must have seen it for themselves, otherwise why would they stop thinking I was crazy for what I said I saw? Or else maybe, just maybe, Dogman also talked to them through the television set? Get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Come back for more scary stories.